is right here, because we're going to go through them and just confirm there's no duplicates later when we ask the questions. So get them in the next 5 to 10 minutes if you can. Good evening, everyone. We're going to get started now. Again, if you have the speaker cards, you're welcome just to bring them up to Ms. Pumili at the end. Okay. Thank you all for being here tonight. We really appreciate it. This is, as we stated in our Culver Pride and the newsletters and the communications, the purpose of our meeting tonight is to really talk about how the school district and the police department are collaborating and working together to ensure school safety, especially in light of a lot of the recent events around the country. Here, I just want to kind of give you some structure of the meeting tonight, how most of our board workshops operate. So, we do have the speaker cards. Our workshops are 2 hours long. They go from 6:30 to 8:30. This is just to keep structure for the meeting and to respect everyone's time, to respect your time, well, especially people with families and kids, to respect our time, respect our guests' time. So we will stop at 8:30 tonight. That won't be the end of the discussion, though. We know that we'll continue these discussions in the coming weeks and in the months, so that we're not here to resolve anything tonight. This is just a start. The purpose of the questions and why Ms. Pumili is collecting them is so that we can kind of go through them. They will ask the questions on your behalf. We want to make sure we are addressing all the questions, but we also want to make sure that we're not getting 10 or 12 cards with the same question too. So they're going through those now. We do want to make sure, though, that we address as many of the questions as possible. Let's see what else. I want to thank the Culver City Police Department for being here and being here and presenting for us. I also want to thank the high school's ASB team for inviting us and the police department to their national walkout planning meeting. I know they're still working on the planning and more information is to come. I want to thank Ken Mann for live streaming this on our Facebook page, CCUSD Facebook page. So you can text anyone right now who can't be there and let them know it is live streamed on there. And now I am going to hand it off to our Superintendent, Leslie Lockhart, who will continue on.
Okay. Good evening. Thank you, Board President Allaire, and good evening to all of our board members, our school community, and Culver City Police Department and Cabinet. Tonight our workshop is focusing on our students. We are focusing on what we are doing and what we can do better to address our students and staff security and safety in our schools. It's been an emotional couple of weeks. We have felt the loss and pain for the Stoneman High School community in Florida, and we've gone through some of our own safety issues recently in our community. For our students and our parents, it has been scary, to say the least. It's important to all of us that we're taking the time to discuss the issues that come into our community so that we're working together to solve these problems together. As you may know, our board, our community, our staff, our district is committed to equity and access to all educational, artistic, athletic, and opportunities. Safety is paramount to us to achieving these goals. Children can't achieve if they don't feel safe. To that end, it is important for us to take a closer look at our safety plans and our security procedures. There are procedures that we already have in place, and there's procedures that we are currently looking to improve. I just want to state some of the things that we have already in place. Currently, all CCUSD schools have formal school safety plans, the communication radios, emergency supplies. They conduct regular drills, which would include fire, earthquake, as well as lockdown drills. We have over 100 surveillance cameras. We have a dedicated security team led by our security director, Ted Ronchetti, and a full-time school resource officer. We ask for you, as parents, to always make sure that your information is up to date. We need that information to refer to in our school system. And that when you come in to our schools, that you check into the front office and make sure that you go through our Raptor system, which is what reads everyone's license. That's really important as well. And we realize that it takes more time to do that, but we appreciate your patience. We're trying to make sure that our schools are safe. So that just that you know, that's a combined effort. It's not only just the school district, it's not just Culver City Police Department, it's the community, it's the parents. We need to work together to make sure our students are safe. Tonight is part of that ongoing effort, and I'd like to publicly thank our Culver City police officers who have been such an outstanding support to our schools. I'd like to thank Police Chief Bixby, who's over there, Assistant Chief Ron Azuka, who's over there, Captain Sam Agaibi, here he is right there, Captain Jason Sims, Lieutenant Troy Dunlap, Lieutenant Bill Brown, Sergeant Dan Sukal, and every officer and detective that they've provided to us over the past weeks to help us with our students and keep them safe. Tonight you're going to hear a safety presentation from Captain Jason Sims and a presentation from Sergeant Dan Sukal on the run, hide, fight protocol, and we will also be able to have time to answer questions. Thank you. Captain Sims.
Thank you, Superintendent Lockhart. Is this on? Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. All right, so thank you, Superintendent Lockhart and members of the school board. We really appreciate you giving us the opportunity to speak here tonight. So I'm going to start off with a summary of some of the events that have happened at our high school and middle school recently. I'm sure many of you have already heard of these events, and so I want to make sure you have the facts versus some of those rumors that often tend to swirl around with these types of incidents. Okay, so again, want to give you the facts. So first off, I want to make it clear so you have an understanding of how we respond to threats of violence, especially including firearms, at our schools. Okay, so the first thing we're going to do, if we get a report either from the school or a parent or whoever it might be of a student making threats of violence at our schools, we take every one of those reports seriously and we handle them appropriately and thoroughly. Okay, so first thing we're going to do is we're going to respond out to the scene of the report, wherever it might be, whether it's the home or the school. Oftentimes it's the school. And we're going to talk to everybody involved. We're going to interview the students, we're going to interview the staff, faculty, administration, whoever it might be, to get a good understanding of what is happening, what is going on, okay? We are going to, based on that information, decide, is this a credible threat? Is this something that warrants more investigating? Most of the time we are going to investigate every time we're going to investigate every possible lead. And oftentimes that includes going to the home. Okay. When we go to the home, we're going to make contact with the parents, which is a crucial part of these types of investigations because we want to bring the parents into the loop as soon as we can. And then also check the home for firearms. Okay, so we check all those boxes. And then what we do, and we feel like this is also a very critical, if not the most critical component of these investigations, that we always follow up with mental health services. And we have with us tonight Dr. Dan Richardson. He's here. He was not introduced. Where are you, Dr. Dan? He's in the back. He works with us 30 hours a week. He is an employee of the Los Angeles County Department of Mental Health. He's a mental health professional. He is a doctor, as I mentioned, and he's a huge resource to us, and he goes out and follows up with the families and the suspects in these cases to offer whatever services are appropriate for that situation. So first off, to get into the incidents, on February 15th, we received a report of a student who had made threats and mentioned firearms at the high school. okay? Obviously, I've already mentioned what we do in these situations. We responded, we talked to everybody involved, and we determined that, hey, this warrants more investigating, went to the home, brought the parents into the fold, determined that the threat was not, it was not a crime, it was not a criminal situation, but certainly concerning that a student is making these types of comments. The comments were vague, they weren't a specific threat, I'm going to commit these acts on these dates and things like that. And so we did a search of the home in that incident and did recover an unsecured firearm. And that was turned over to us by the parents. So we have that firearm in safekeeping and, again, followed up with our mental health services. The next incident was on February 22nd, and this occurred at the middle school. Again, similarly, a student was heard making vague threats or making comments about firearms and school, and students reported this behavior to staff, which is critical. That is critical, and we encourage you when you're talking to your children, we have to take this stuff seriously, and we cannot overlook any threats or any comments, and we're never going to feel like we are being burdened when we get these calls. Please encourage your kids to call us, and do so yourself if you're made aware of these types of threats or comments. We responded to the school and again interviewed everybody involved, and we were unable to prove that there was any type of crime, again, with this situation, so this was not a criminal situation. We attempted to do a search of the residence in that instance, but we were assured by the parents that although there were firearms in the home, they were secured safely. Okay, so we didn't have a right to search the home in that instance, but we would have if we had a right to do so. And again, followed up with our mental health services. So lastly, February 28th, and this is probably the one that most of you are aware of, this resulted in an arrest of one of our students. Threats were made similar to the incidents that I previously mentioned, although these were specific threats enough to amount to a crime. So in that instance, we did make an arrest. We did respond to the residents, worked with the parents. A firearm was turned over to us. We have that in safekeeping. That juvenile, that minor, was charged with a crime and is still in custody. Now, some of you may be aware of these incidents and want to make very clear this is important. Please don't mention the names of these minors when you're asking questions, when you're talking to the folks here in the room. Confidentiality related to these types of cases is paramount. Okay, so please don't do that. Okay, so we want to reassure you as parents that we as a police department are as prepared as we can be to respond to these types of incidents. We train our officers regularly to respond to these types of incidents. It's our new normal that these are occurring, and so we make it a point to ensure that our people are prepared. Annually, we hold large-scale training events. We recently in December held one at Sony Picture Studios. Most years we hold one at one of our city schools. We work in conjunction with the fire department when we do these types of trainings. And again, it's to prepare our officers to respond, God forbid, to one of these types of critical incidents should they occur in one of our schools or anywhere within the city, these active shooter type incidents, okay? So we're regularly training on these, how to respond to these types of incidents. As was previously mentioned by Superintendent Lockhart, we do have a full-time school resource officer who is involved at many levels with our 16 schools here in the city, both public and private. But most importantly, he serves as he provides a sense of security at our high school and middle school, which is where he spends most of his time. Equipment-wise, we are equipped to handle these types of incidents, and we're continually evaluating our equipment needs. Moving forward, as was mentioned by Superintendent Lockhart, we are going to work with our schools to assess safety and safety needs and be a resource to our school board, school administrators. And I want to make a point to say that we have always had a very close working relationship with our school board, school administrators, and all the schools here in Culver City. We pride ourselves on that, and that will not change and will continue moving forward. And we will continue to work closely with our schools. I want to talk a little bit about gun laws here in California because I also know that that's a hot topic. So here in California, we have the third most strict gun control laws in our country. The only states that have more strict laws are Massachusetts and Hawaii. Okay? Here in California, anyone who buys a gun must undergo a background check. Certain arrests or mental health issues can preclude someone from purchasing a firearm. Okay? Anyone who purchases a firearm must wait 10 days to pick that firearm up. So that means if you go into a gun store to buy a firearm today, you can't take ownership of that gun until 10 days after that. Also, anyone who buys a firearm must undergo a safety test, which includes manipulation of the firearm, safe handling, and also storage, which I would like to talk about now. As I mentioned before when I was talking about the recent incidents that we've had at the high school, we recovered 2 firearms from homes that were not stored securely or in a safe way. I can't stress the importance, if you are an adult who chooses to have firearms in your home, you must, by law, store them in a safe manner, which means either in a safe or locked in a way that makes them unable to operate. Okay? We at the Culver City Police Department have always taken back unwanted firearms. So anybody at any time can turn a firearm that is unwanted over to the police department, and we will then destroy that firearm. We do that on an annual basis. I would just ask, if you decide to turn in an unwanted firearm, please do so in a safe way. Bring it in a gun box, or leave it in your car and tell the desk officer that you have the firearm. Please don't walk into our lobby with a firearm in your hand. Okay? Also, we are open to and exploring the possibility of holding a large incentivized gun take back day. Okay, and we'll see if we can do that sometime in the next few months. Lastly, I want to mention our public notification system. So we use a system called Nixle. Anyone signed up for Nixle here? Raise your hand, please. I would encourage you, especially as parents of students who are attending our schools, to sign up for Nixle. In emergencies, that's how we get information to you. I know your school board and school administrators have systems in place as well. This is information that you're going to be getting from, and we're going to be working with these folks, God forbid some type of incident like that should occur. It's really effective. It goes straight to your cell phone as a text. And if you have a smartphone right now and you want to sign up, all you need to do, and we also have a handout, take it out, text CCPD to the phone number, 888-777, 3 8s, 3 7s, and you are signed up for Nixle, and you will receive notifications from the Culver City Police Department. Okay? Thank you for your time. I want to introduce Sergeant Dan Sukal, who is our resident expert on the run, hide, fight strategies, and will be presenting to you tonight. Thank you.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. I want to thank the superintendent and the board for having us here. Never thought in my 28 years as a police officer here in the city that I would be showing up at a meeting like this talking about the subject that I'm going to be talking about. And I'm sure you as parents and students and staff wouldn't have thought in a million years you'd be coming to hear about the topic that we're going to be talking about tonight. And I want to applaud all of you for coming here and for just being more informed. There we go. I'm going to go over an overview of what I'm going to be talking about tonight. And essentially, this information is for you. There's a lot of anxiety, a lot of worry. And what we want to do is just provide you with information that you can share with your children, your loved ones. So if, God forbid, something like this happened at one of our schools, we can survive this. All right, so just an overview of what I'm going to be talking about tonight. What is an active shooter situation? We're going to watch a video that goes over some of these strategies that we have to help us survive an incident like that. Awareness, Run, hide, fight. We're going to be talking, you've heard that. We're going to be talking a lot about that tonight, what that means. Really important, what to expect if something like this happens, what to expect from the police, from law enforcement when they arrive. How should you as a student, and this is the information you're going to be conveying to your children, how should they react when the police arrive? The information that we're going to need to help resolve this situation. And then lastly, and most importantly, what should you as a parent be doing right now to prepare for this? So what I'm going to be talking about is actually, a lot of it is in this handout. And hopefully you picked it up. It's Active Shooter Guidebook. And it's also on the school board's, or I'm sorry, the school district's website. And the ccusd.org has a lot of good information. It's a place where there's a tremendous amount of resources. So if you go to the website, go to departments, to security, school safety information, this booklet will be there. There's also a really good video on active shooter. We don't have time to view that video, but I recommend that you watch it. It's graphic, so watch it before you share it with your children. If it's age appropriate for your children, watch it. It talks about a campus incident, a food court incident, and a workplace incident. So it's not just for schools, but it'll help you out also as well. So again, a good place, good resource. So I'm going to go over a lot of information tonight, and like I said, a lot of it's in your handout, so I'm not going to spend a whole lot of time on certain things, but I am going to highlight some things that I think should be highlighted. So first off, we're going to we're going to talk about what is an active shooter. It's kind of silly, but what is an active shooter situation? So an active shooter is an individual actively engaged in killing or attempting to kill people in a confined populated area. In most cases, active shooters use firearms, and there is no pattern or method to the selection of their victims. And active shooter situations are unpredictable and evolve quickly. Typically, the immediate deployment of law enforcement is required to stop the shooting and mitigate harm to victims. Okay, and this is really important. Because active shooter situations are often over within 10 to 15 minutes, possibly before law enforcement arrives on scene, individuals must be prepared both mentally and physically to deal with an active shooter situation. So here in our city, we have a really good response time. It's typically about 3 minutes for an emergency type call, so that's pretty good. But these situations here, a lot of times they're over before law enforcement arrives. So this is really important for you and for your children to be, as it says here, to be mentally and physically prepared just in case. We're going to get there fast, but there could be a situation where you're barricaded someplace and this is going on, and this is what we're going to be talking about tonight. So we're going to watch a video, and the video is going to go over a lot of what I'm going to talk about: awareness and the run, hide, fight. It was produced by the Santa Ana Unified School District, and it's on YouTube, and just search for it. It's called Surviving a School Shooting for Staff and Students. As the name suggests, this was produced for the staff and for students. So we're going to watch the video. Yes, this is not the graphic video that I was talking about. This is appropriate for children. Thank you.
Now you remember from our reading yesterday, we should think of our schools in the same way we think of our communities. Teachers, staff, and students all working together to keep a watchful eye for anything out of the ordinary. This neighborhood watch approach to campus security is vital. If we see anything that appears suspicious, we need to report it. It could be as simple as noticing that a door is propped open when it should be closed and locked. Or it could be more complicated, perceiving sudden mood swings or aggressive behavior in a coworker or student. Either way, these concerns must be corrected immediately or reported for further assessment. When an active shooter attacks a campus, realize that as teachers and staff, we are the first responders. In those crucial moments between the start of the assault and to the arrival of law enforcement, we must adopt a survival mindset. We need to seize the initiative and decide what actions to take and when to take them. Here are 3 effective strategies to counter an active shooter assault. We can run, we can hide, we can fight. Don't think of these as progressive steps. First I run, and then I hide, and finally I fight. Think of them instead as options that best suit your particular situation and location during the assault. An active shooter on a school campus is in search of targets. We want to use run, hide, and fight to undermine that objective. For example, the distance of some individuals to the shooter will safely allow a strategy of run in order to make their escape. Other people may adopt a strategy of hide, to build a barricade and take cover in a secured room. Still others, primarily due to their close proximity to the shooter, may have no alternative but to fight. If you have the chance to safely leave the school grounds, the run strategy should be your first course of action. Run takes you out of harm's way and puts distance between you and the shooter. Keep everyone together throughout your escape. If you meet others, take them with you as you exit, but do not stay behind if they will not go. If the location of the active shooter is not known or is too close for you to escape, then the hide strategy may be your better option. Hide is very similar to our policy of lockdown. Doors should be locked, windows closed and covered, lights turned out, and cell phones turned off with everyone remaining quiet. If necessary, impromptu barricades or other means of cover should be employed. Hiding involves seeking concealment in as secure a location as possible, out of the shooter's view. The intent of the hide strategy is to induce the shooter to bypass your area, or restrict his entry and further frustrate his intent. Fight is a strategy of last resort. Use it only when your life is in immediate danger and no other options are available to you. To be effective, our actions must involve concentrated use of our strength, quickness, and aggression. Remember, fight is not about heroics, it's about survival. Use defensive tools such as chairs, textbooks, fire extinguishers, or other items to disrupt or stop the shooter. No single response will fit all active shooter situations. In some cases, you'll use one strategy to buy time for another. For example, building a barricade to slow the active shooter while you make your escape by breaking a window and exiting.
There you go.
Contact law enforcement only when it is safe to do so. Never presume that someone else has already made the call. Law enforcement will speed to your campus in force. Their sole concern will be to quickly neutralize the shooter. When you encounter officers, try your best to remain calm and obey their commands. Active shooter attacks unfold quickly. There may not be opportunity for an announcement through the school's public address system. Notification may in fact come from the sounds of gunfire, screams, and voices in distress. Always be on the alert. The truth is that an active shooter attack on campus is likely to be the most frightening experience of your life. The more we plan and prepare, the more we practice and drill these plans, the more automatic our response will be.
Again, this is a very difficult subject to talk about, but it's really critical that you have those age-appropriate conversations with our children and students. So one of the best ways to deal with this issue is obviously to address it before it happens. So this is where awareness comes in. The video talks about having that neighborhood watch type of mentality where everybody is involved and just keeping an eye on everything. Okay, as Captain Sims talked about, it's really important for our students to feel comfortable to bring up certain things to either staff or parents. And it's important for all of us to take those reports seriously. So again, talk to your children about having awareness. Be aware of their environment. If they notice somebody that comes onto campus that doesn't belong there, or if somebody's just not dressed right, if something just doesn't seem right, obviously that's something that they need to report. This is something that they drill all the time, but it's really important that you need to recognize where the exits are and safe routes. Identify possible dangers, and as we talked about, just these things that just don't feel right, okay? And as Captain Sims talked about, if you see something or if you hear something, if you overhear something, it needs to be reported. So the best way to deal with these things is to get them before they obviously get to that point where we're going to be talking about next. So the video talks about these strategies of run, hide, fight. And we're going to talk about that. The video talks about that these are strategies and they're not to be taken as linear, meaning you don't have to run first and then hide and then fight next. It depends on the situation. You may hide first or you may fight first. And we're going to go and we're going to talk about those three things right now. And again, all of this information is in this handout. I'm not going to spend a lot of time on each point. I'm just going to highlight some of them. Okay, run, evacuate, get away from the threat. Okay, get as far away from the threat as you can. If there's an accessible escape route, take it. This is important. Evacuate regardless if anybody else is going with you. Just leave. If your friends aren't going to go, that's fine. You need to evacuate. Leave your belongings behind. Don't go back for backpacks or things or jackets like that. If this is happening out in the yard, just leave. You don't have time to go back to your classroom. Help others if you can. And obviously, if you know that there's a threat in this area and you're running that way and you see somebody coming the other way, if they don't recognize that you're fleeing from something, obviously let them know, don't go down that way, you need to go this way. This is really important, especially when the police arrive, is just to keep your hands visible. Follow instructions by the police. And this is a hard one. This is really hard. And again, you have to have these conversations with your children. If somebody is wounded and they can't move, you're not going to do any good if you're there trying to help them and the shooter comes by. You're going to be another victim. This is really hard, but we're asking you to leave. When officers arrive and when medical personnel show up, they're going to start evacuating those people. But we just need everybody to leave. And when it's safe, call 911. So obviously that's the run. Just get away as fast as you can if you're able. If for some reason you're not able to evacuate, find a place where the active shooter is less likely to find you. And these are some things to think about when you're finding a place where you're going to hide. Be out of view of the shooter. So stay away from windows, from other areas where you can be seen. Your hiding place should provide you with protection if shots are fired. Okay, so a good place is someplace behind a brick wall or concrete. Behind a door or just a regular wall with drywall will not stop bullets. Okay, so that's something to consider. You need to find a place where we call hard cover. And get into a place where if you need to leave that place quickly, you can, instead of just being trapped in that place. If you're in some type of hiding place, these seem obvious, but in a stressful situation, you may forget. Lock the door, if possible. If that's not possible, go ahead and try and blockade the door with heavy furniture or anything that will prevent somebody from coming in. This is another important one. Silence your cell phones. If an incident's going off like that, cell phones are going to be blowing up. So if you're trying to hide someplace, you really need to silence your cell phones, okay? Along with that, and we'll talk a little bit more about this, even though your cell phone is silent, you can still text 911, okay? So that's a feature on smartphones where you go to your texting app and you type in 911 for the 2, and then you just start typing in the emergency, and it'll go to a 911 dispatcher. So you can communicate without a verbal. Just text the information, and the 911 operator will receive that. Turn off lights and any source of noise, radios, televisions, hide behind large items, and remain quiet. Fight. Again, have age-appropriate conversations with your children. Take action against the active shooter as a last resort, and only when your life is in imminent danger attempt to disrupt or incapacitate the active shooter. And just grab whatever you can. And this could be a conversation that you can have with your kids just in their bedroom. What is something that you can use as a weapon or a diversionary device or something that will help you survive? It's really important that they act aggressively. Again, improvising weapons. In the video, they showed grabbing a flagpole, books, a laptop, a fire extinguisher, anything that they can use to help them survive. Throwing items, yelling, and this is really important, that they have to be committed. If the decision is made, they have to go full force and carry it through. Okay, what to expect when police officers arrive. Really important. If this is an active shooter where we still have someone out still trying to kill people, the first officers on scene will not stop to help injured people. Their sole priority at this point is to make contact with the shooter and to make him stop. Okay, so they're going to bypass injured people. As more resources start coming in, we will start forming rescue teams. And this is going to be in conjunction with our police officers and our firefighters. We've been training for over 13 years with our firefighters doing this. So they all know the drill. They're going to form up. We're going to have officers. They're going to come in, and they're going to start treating injured people. And at some point, as more resources start coming in, they're going to start extracting wounded people. And these are just some of the photographs that we took. The ones on the left are 13 years ago. And this is with our firefighters and our police officers. And we use simunitions, and these the firefighters and the officers on the left are actually taking fire as they're treating and evacuating wounded students. And on the right was just last year when we were doing an active shooter drill or training at the high school. And you can see we train hand in hand with our firefighters. So the picture on the right, we have an officer with a rifle and we have a firefighter right there next to him. And the same thing on the bottom photograph. So as Captain Sims says, we train constantly, and we train with our firefighters. Okay, continuing, what to expect when officers arrive. So after the scene is stabilized, we're probably going to remove the students and staff, whoever's involved, to a safe area. And at this point, we're going to start assessing what's going on. They're possibly witnesses, they're victims, and we could potentially have a suspect in the mix here. So we're sorting all this out. We got to interview everyone, and we have to account for all the students. If they came to school that day and their name was on the roll, we have to account for them. So this is an area where we're going to account for them. And it's really important, if you're in contact with them, just assure them that everything's fine, they're safe, and at some point they are going to be reunited. But it's really important that they not leave. Okay, this is for the students and staff when the police officers arrive. Try and remain calm. I mean, it sounds like a silly slide here, but again, these are conversations that you're going to have. Try and remain calm and follow the officer's instructions. Really important, because again, as we're rolling in, we're not going to know who the suspect is from, it could be potentially be a student or somebody else. So it's really important that they keep their hands clear. Put anything down, bags, jackets, things like that. Raise their hands, spread their fingers, and keep their hands visible. Avoid making quick movements towards officers, such as holding onto them for safety. Avoid pointing, screaming, or yelling. And again, if these are the first officers on scene, they have a mission. They're going to go and they're going to try and stop the threat. So it's not a good time to be asking for directions. So the safest thing is to just leave the way that the officers came. So let's say, for instance, we had a shooter down there. You guys are in here and you're hunkered down. We have officers that roll into this room and they're telling you to get out, and then they go that way. The best way to go is the way they came. Okay, so again, this is really important to explain that to our students, that if the officers aren't directing them to a certain place, the best place to go is where they just came from. Okay. Okay, this is information that we would like to get. So if students are in a safe place, where they're able to call 911 or use the texting 911 app, this is information that we would like to have. The location of the shooter, how many shooters there are, if there are more than one, physical descriptions, the number and type of weapons, and how many potential victims we have, so we can plan our response accordingly. Again, all this information is, I know I'm going quick, all this information is in your handout. So, lastly, what should you do as a parent, or you have someone you care about that's a student here? Pre-planning. Pre-planning is essential. Talk to your child about the information that we just covered. And again, I applaud you for coming out here and getting this information, but it doesn't do any good if you leave here and you don't share that information. So again, have that age-appropriate conversation, cover this stuff with your children. Really important. If your child self-evacuates, if they find themselves outside of a campus for whatever reason, right now you should have pre-designated locations for you to meet up with them. So if they're at Linwood Howe and somehow they get away from campus, you've already told your child, if you're off of campus and you're on the west side, go to the police department. Okay? Or if you're on the north side, go to the movie theater and we'll meet you over there. Okay? So figure those out now and have that in place. So if something, God forbid, happens, they're outside of the school, you'll know where to go. You know that, they know that, and they'll go there, and you'll be able to get them from there. Really, really, really important. Do not go to the location where the incident's happening, okay? The reason is, more than likely, you're going to become part of the problem for us, okay? If we have a shooter or we have wounded people, we need to get law enforcement resources there. We need to get emergency medical services there. And you all know what it's like here before and after school when you're dropping off or picking up. It's hard enough to get through the streets during that time. Imagine some huge event happening. We need to get resources. We need to have the roads clear so we can bring in resources, and then we can take out wounded people that need medical attention. So avoid this temptation. As a parent, I know that's hard, and we're asking all of you to cooperate on that. Do not go to the location. This brings me to a very important point. We know that you need information as soon as possible. Okay, so we have in place our public information officer, which is currently Lieutenant Dunlap. The school has a public information officer. We're going to coordinate all that information, and we're going to push that information out as soon as we can. So as Captain Sims talked about, if you have the Nixle app, that is perfect. That's what this is designed for. We're going to be pushing information out for you on where, back up, on an area where you can stage, okay, while you're waiting, and then a reunification area where you'll be reunited with your child. But until then, do not go there. But we're going to be pushing out information as soon as we can. I'm going to wrap up here. These are some resources for you. One of the better ones is the ccusd.org website that has all that information. The City of Culver City website, the emergency preparedness portion of that has really good information for you guys to have. Again, if you haven't got Nixle yet, please do that. Again, text 911, talk to your children about that. All it is go to your messaging, type 911 for the 2, and then you go to your message and just keep it short. I need police here, active shooter, they're at this location, and send. All right. So I'm done with that part of the presentation. I just want to let you know that I've been training our officers to do this for almost 15 years now. That's one of my jobs. And most of us on the department have children or nieces, nephews, things like that. And I can tell you when an incident like this happens, your children become our children. So when they're responding, and I've seen it firsthand, they're responding as if they're going in to save their children. So I want you to keep that in mind. Okay? Thank you.
Is everyone okay if we're asking the questions and kind of moving through those questions that you've turned in? Does anyone have any other cards that they'd like to turn in that they haven't turned in yet? Bring them up. Okay. And if you're writing a question now and you hear that your question has already been asked, then just hold the card. Yes. And if you want to write if you're going to make a statement, then we'll ask you to come to the microphone to make a statement. So one of the first questions, and we won't say everyone's name who writes the question, just to kind of keep everything anonymous. Question: please explain the role of a resource officer and how many are available to help the CCUSD.
I was loaning my pen to somebody. I didn't type, but I got it now. Anyway, good evening, and thanks for being here, and thank you to the superintendent and the school board. My name's Scott Bixby, and I'm the chief of police here. I think the question was how many SROs do we have and what is their role?
Yes.
We have one SRO, and that role is to be at the different schools. We have 16, as Captain Sims said a little bit earlier, public and private, and their sole job is to be at those schools, to be a liaison with the schools for all things police related.
Okay, thank you.
Possible to raise the mic?
Yeah.
So we can hear better? Thank you. Thank you.
Turn it up. Is that better?
Yes.
Perfect.
Did you want him to answer that again? Everyone heard? Okay. Next question. How do you continue to follow up on students who make threats that are not a crime to ensure that the student doesn't escalate to a criminal?
Well, again, I think Captain Sims covered this when he talked about our mental health resource, and we do have Dr. Dan Richardson here who could probably explain this a little bit better. But once we do the investigation and we find out exactly what the issue is, we go to the home, we do follow up with the mental health part of it. So, Dr. Dan?
Good evening. So I just wanted to bring up some of the resources that we have. I'm a psychologist and I work for LA County Department of Mental Health, and I'm assigned to Culver City Police Department to co-respond in the field to various mental health situations. One of the main resources that you may have heard about in the news recently because of recent events is the START program. Now, START is an acronym that stands for the School Threat Assessment Response Team. Now, this is a nationally recognized program that's been developed by LA County Department of Mental Health, and basically it is to follow up when there has been a threat or there may be a threat, to determine the nature of the threat, whether it's credible, and then to follow up. Most importantly, the aftermath, the follow-up. We like to get people into services, whether that's mental health services or some other type of services that can give them an avenue of hope. Because in many situations, we've seen that people who make threats in these type of situations are often at their end of their tether. And traditionally, the thought has been to expel students, but we kind of prefer to take a different approach, because if you expel somebody, then they're in the wind. You don't know what's going on with that person. So we like to follow up with them. The team will go out, visit the home, they'll meet with the parents, and it was mentioned earlier, the team will also get into the student's bedroom as well, with the permission of the parents, and that's very important. We find out a lot of information about what's going on by going into the home and specifically looking in the bedroom, social media, all these other areas that can yield information. But basically, the START program is the team that's going to follow up. Thank you.
Thank you. Next question. Would the police communicate to parents in the event of a lockdown on our schools?
Yes, again, I think that Captain Sims and Sergeant Sukal covered that. Your best bet is Nixle. That's the best way to get the quickest information possible. You're also, I'm sure, going to hear from the school.
Just to add on to that, that's why it's really important that we make sure that we have current information. We're not going to communicate through Culver Pride, obviously, because that goes to a lot more people than outside of our community. But we will communicate through School Messenger, which means that whatever numbers that you have on file, that's what School Messenger will go to. We also have our schools that have Twitter accounts and our official Facebook account. That's the other way that we would communicate as well. So please make sure you're linked into all those different medias.
And please understand, these things are fluid, and again, God forbid this ever happens in this city or anywhere for that matter. But should this happen, I know people want information as fast as possible. Understand that as information comes out, it's not always completely accurate. And we'll try and get it out as quick as we possibly can, but I'd rather get out accurate information than false information. So please, it's easy for me to say now, and it's easy for you to understand now, but I promise you that in a crisis situation like that, parents are going to be concerned about their kids, and rightfully so, but understand sometimes these things take time to get the information out, and we want accurate information.
Okay, next question. What are we going to do to avoid kids having access to guns when we have several gun stores in Culver City?
I guess you want me to answer that. Well, the one gun store that I know of in Culver City is Martin B. Redding, and I know it's been here for, actually I don't know how long it's been here. It's been here as long as I've been around, and it's been about 40 years. We do have laws in place, like Captain Sims stated. We have the third most strict laws of all the states in the union, and obviously now that these things have happened and they seem to be happening more often, those laws are getting more and more strict. You can't buy a weapon unless you're 21 years old, and then there's a waiting period in the background check, at least in this state. So what else are we doing that we can control that even more so? That's up to the legislators.
Has there been analysis due to the Douglas incident, and what would CCUSD and CCPD have been able to, what would they do differently, if anything?
Well, I don't think at this point it's been long enough to actually get a very fair assessment and a critique of that particular incident. I know that a lot of people have heard about a deputy was accused of not going in when he probably should have, or some others that didn't go in. I don't know all the circumstances. Nobody does just yet. Again, we have certain tactics in place, and those are guidelines. What we're going to do is if we get to a location, again, our main priority when we first get there is to stop the threat, however we need to do that. And I know that our officers are going to go in just as fast as they possibly can. But understand, each incident could be very, very different. Our way of doing things is we want to have 2 officers there if we can, but that may not always hold true. It may be just 1 officer there, and if he has an opportunity to stop the threat, then he's going to do that. So I really can't comment on what happened there in Florida. It really wouldn't be fair of me. I don't know all the facts.
Thank you. Coordination with federal authorities. Does CCPD maintain contact with and share intelligence with the FBI or ATF on potential threats in our community?
We do belong to a certain group, a joint regional task force. It's in intelligence, so to speak, and the FBI is part of that, and also the ATF. So we are in contact with them in certain situations. I can tell you I don't know of any time in the recent past we've been in contact with, specifically with regard to school shootings.
Thank you. How do you feel about arming teachers, coaches, etc., if they have the proper background checks and firearms training? And also, are psychological checks also conducted on each firearm applicant? How effective is your ride-along psychologist been?
Well, it was like a 3-point question.
Sorry, okay, let's start with, okay. Arming teachers, coaches.
Well, I could make an argument for and against that. The first thing I think of is, what worries me is that now you have a gun at school or more guns at school all the time. So that's a concern for me. Is somebody capable of doing that? Is somebody willing to do that? My personal feeling is I don't like the idea.
And then how effective has your ride-along psychologist been?
He's been outstanding. We get nothing but praise about him. We have about, I think about 20, 25 mental health related calls every month. I think that, my brother's at 40. 3 a week. We usually have about 1 commitment a week, which is a 72-hour hold for somebody who's exhibiting some signs that they need some professional help. So we're very, very busy in the mental health arena, and we couldn't do it. We couldn't be as successful as we are without Dr. Dan, so he's been outstanding.
What is the CCPD opinion on the district consider installing metal detectors for safety of the staff and students for the middle school and high school?
I think that there's several different things that can be done. It just boils down to, honestly, how much of a lockdown of a school do you want? That's really what it comes down to. If you want metal detectors, you want barbed wire, you want a dome on top of it, it really gets down to just that. How strict and how much of a lockdown school do you want versus an open campus? And I realize it's going to have to be some kind of a happy medium. I don't think anybody here wants a school that looks like a prison, but first and foremost is the safety of our kids. So I think it's a tool that can be used. I don't think it's the answer to everything.
Okay. Okay, this is a statement? No. Okay, can we change the gun store near, okay. Can we change the gun store near La Bayona to a flower shop? Because I have had many lockdowns in my school, than an average school over 5, and one has been so severe that we stayed in a corner quiet for 2 hours and everyone was scared.
Can we change the gun store into a flower shop?
Yes.
I don't know that Martin B. Ready wants to sell flowers now. I know there's Culver flowers down the road. Honestly, that's really not a question for me. I can't answer that. It sounds nice.
Okay. Okay. So, okay. This is also for our security director, how do they monitor who enters campus with all of the different access points? And,
Often the same, multiple access points.
right.
During the school day, all of those access points, other than the main entrance to the school offices, are locked down. We do have cameras at every single school site that cover every access point, gates, front doors, whatever it may be.
Oh, in case you didn't know, this is our security director, Ted Ronchetti. Sorry, go ahead.
Was there another question?
What's being done at CCHS to secure entry-exit points with security? Also in the morning, we're worried about multiple entry points, as well as the bike path and the bridge.
We are currently reviewing how many access points we're going to have open at the middle school and high school. Currently, I think there's 4 to 6 that are open at the high school, which is way too many. It's beyond our ability to personally man it with security personnel. As far as the bike path in the creek, that's an area that is not controlled by CCUSD. During the summertime and the springtime, we do have 2 bike patrol units that go out and patrol the creek, as well as taking the creek and going to the elementary school sites.
Thank you. Okay, don't go anywhere. What measures are taken to ensure safety specifically at Culver City Middle School at lunchtime? Is there any possibility of staggering lunch by grade level for greater security at Culver City Middle School?
Currently, the supervision is all security personnel are supervising the middle school lunch. So that right now is approximately 6 officers plus myself, and our dispatch is going out there and supervising. And that's in addition to the middle school staff, the adults that are out there, which would be the 3 administrators and occasionally counselors and whatever other adults are available. I'm sorry, what was the second part of that?
Staggering the lunchtime.
Staggering the lunchtime is something that I have no input on, but I would say that staggering the lunchtime is going to be difficult because of the number of students and the amount of time that the cafeteria workers have to prepare the lunch for the high school which follows directly after the middle school lunch, as well as ensuring that our personnel get to take their breaks and their lunches prior to that. So the amount of time that it would take up throughout the day to do that is going to be difficult. I don't know that it's not possible, but it's just something that's going to be difficult, and we can certainly review it.
Definitely look at it, okay. What is Culver City High School doing differently now that a threat of a potential active shooter?
Like I mentioned earlier, we're reducing the number of access points. We're also trying to ensure that the access points that we do have open, that we have manned, they are manned with security personnel. And we're also looking at other ways for access control of the front of the offices at all of the school sites, as well as some other protective measures to prevent or to make it more difficult to actually enter the school sites.
Thank you. Okay, I think you're all clear for right now. Okay, we've heard that there is a planned walkout on March 14th during the school day. Why is it during the school day? Can it not be before school or after school? What are the plans that the high school has in the middle school for the walkout day? And what about, how do you deal with peer or parental pressure to participate or to not participate in this event? So we have Ms. Tarvett from the high school, and we have Ms. Villafranca from the middle school, and
Carolyn Dodenhoff
from the high school.
So this is Carolyn. She's actually our organizer for the walkout, so I'm going to have her go ahead and speak to share the information.
Hello, my name is Carolyn Dodenhoff. I'm a senior at Culver City High School. I went to El Marino, I went to CCMS, and I'll be graduating this year. The walkout that I've been planning with my co-leader, who's also a senior, is going to take place at 10 a.m. I understand the concerns from parents as it might seem to take away from the school day, but we're creating a schedule around it so that there's going to be one period of time where either kids will walk out to the football field, and this is both the CCMS students and CCHS students. We will have 3 or 4 student speakers, 1 to 2 speakers from the middle school, and then 1 speaker from Culver Park High School. I've been working especially with the administration, who've been extremely supportive. If you've gone on the CCHS website, there's actually a form you can fill out if you're a parent of, and you don't have to be a parent of someone who's in high school. So you can be a parent and your child might be in elementary school, and you are welcome to come as long as you check in at 9 o'clock or 9:15 at the front office, basically the glass doors. Let me see what else I can say. But this is, it's limited to CCUSC parents because you'll be in the system, I would assume. Additionally, we did have it planned to be in front of the school, but because of the threat that was made last week, we felt that it was better and it was more ideal to have it in a football field. That way it's safe and we don't have to have as much risk in terms of people who are going to be able to come in and out. So that was a request that we sought. We wanted to fulfill that because we understand safety is a big priority, and we're doing everything we can to make it successful.
So you about students who don't want to participate.
Yes. So students who don't want to participate, so because we're going to be having it on the football field, there's going to be generally 2 groups of people. We hope to have like most of the people participate, but for those who don't want to, we're going to have a designated area where there's going to be supervisors, teachers who will stay back. Additionally, the teachers who are going to be at the walkout will be wearing shirts to identify themselves. So as far as people are welcome to participate, people don't have to either. So there's going to be teachers both on it's going to be held all on campus. There's going to be the teachers who are going to be supervising those who don't want to participate, as well as ones who are going to be in the walkout at the football field. Can I take questions?
Questions?
So is this all happening at the high school football field?
Yes.
So the middle school kids are going to walk over to the high school field?
Yes.
We sure do.
And there's, if you've ever been to a football game, you know we're going to have it on the actual turf. We want it to feel very unifying. I don't know how, we know it's going to be big, but we're going to have a better sense of it since we have that like Google form. But if you're a parent, definitely, and you really want to come, I would highly recommend it. We want all of your guys' support.
Are the adults that are going to be there or that are turning in the clock going to be cleared as if you were visiting the campus, number one? And number two, what is the main focus? Are we there to memorialize the 17 lives that were lost? Are we...
What is the focus of this walkout?
So yes, anyone that comes on to our campus, they do need to run through our Raptor system. So people will have to go ahead and present their ID, and they will be scanned into our school. The idea of the form is so that we know who is coming. We can verify how many people are coming, and we can go ahead and check and make sure that they do have CCUSD students.
As far as the goals of our event, so our goals primarily is to bring awareness to the issue. We actually had started this before anything happened last week, which I think just goes to show that this is an issue that's touching all of us in this community. So I think, again, the biggest thing is bringing awareness. We actually had a teach-in today in our Centaur Plus, which is like a study hall, for those of you who don't know that. And we had our history teachers actually go over the history of gun violence and the court cases that mattered, so we have a big education focus. We also just want to create more civically minded students. We're a democracy school, which we hold very highly, and this is one way that we are active as students. And personally, I've been very inspired by the students in Parkland. And then finally, we do want to support the students in Parkland, so we're going to be holding some sort of memorial. In general, the biggest thing is just we want people to listen to us because we are the ones who are going to school every day, and it's very challenging knowing that this is a reality that we might have to face. And I don't want it to ever, none of us want it to get that way, and it's just, we need our voices heard, you know?
How do you plan to have your voice heard outside of the campus?
We're going to be having a stage and a sound system set up on the turf.
We've also invited the press to come and join us to get some information out. We do have a press release going out tomorrow from the district announcing this event.
On the middle school side, we're also going to have different tables and booths in which students can participate in certain activities, and one of those would be writing postcards or letters to their local congressman.
Yeah, we're also going to have like a banner, sign things. We want it to be that people don't just feel like bored, that they can go and do things. Yes.
So for the students at the school, the high school and the middle school, how do you feel about like signs that aren't necessarily protesting, but having signs or doing very good?
Yeah, so we're actually doing a sign today. I don't know how many, I recognize a few faces, but we're encouraging students to make signs on their own, but we're also going to be doing events during school next week. We're doing one this Friday and then on Monday. Okay. And we're also going to be making announcements via the PA system to let everyone know about what's going on.
Are parents of elementary school students encouraged to bring their kids to the high school?
No, we invite the parents to come. We're not inviting elementary kids.
if you have questions, can you come up and use the microphone at the front, please? Just for the recording? Okay. Thank you.
Thank you. You mentioned issue, but I'd like you to clarify what is the issue. Is it gun control, what is it exactly that you're intending to be the focus of the issue of that day?
So the focus is going to be on the lack of gun restrictions that is currently supported by our administration, not our administration, our political administration. I made that very clear. Additionally, the issue we see is that people are having panic attacks at school because they're worried that somebody is going to pull out a gun, and that air of paranoia. We want to stop this the paralyzing feeling that people get from fear, and we want people to be empowered to speak out. And whether or not it's because they believe that their legislators aren't doing enough, or that our president isn't doing enough, or that our state assembly isn't doing enough, or that even our local government isn't doing enough. I hope that clarified.
Hear me? Okay. I think what you're doing is great, and I do think that this is a much bigger issue that needs to be taken up at a national level. I also think that there's a very close to home issue that has to be addressed. Are you planning on having any activities that encourage students who do feel stressed out or who don't know how to cope? Because if you have students who are worried about a peer pulling out a weapon, something has to be done to address the issues that that peer is going through. And even if we remove Reddings from Culver City, even if parents don't purchase weapons and have them in their homes, a student who is at the end of their rope, who doesn't know how to manage those emotions, could still become violent. And so I think having the attention of your peers that day would be a great opportunity to address mental health and promote the supports that we have that they can reach out to.
Yeah, I think we've realized this in general, but the Sandy Siegel Youth Center is incredible. They have amazing resources. They have school psychologists. In general, they're just a great resource, which most people don't actually know about. So that's one thing we're trying to push more. Additionally, we focused on this issue because the most logical thing for us when we were thinking about this was that there are too many guns. So we were obviously thinking about the mental health aspect, but I think that usually gets thrown around a lot. And obviously we want to create a more unified campus, but that's not something we can fix with one walkout versus it's more of a problem as we're adolescents.
So we're very fortunate. Our counselors will be at the event also, so they'll be there if students need their support. But once again, we're so blessed to have the Sandy Siegel Youth Health Center right between our campuses that serve all of our students. We have wonderful services within the school district and working with the Sandy Siegel Youth Health Center and the police department to go ahead and support our students and put things in place. We do take everything seriously. We look into it and put in appropriate supports as needed. Thank you. Yeah.
Not a question, but Carolyn, I just want to thank you for your leadership, and I appreciate seeing the cooperation and synergy of the administration and the students, so thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, I think I'm going to have to ask the person to come forward to speak to this, but it says, has Culver City implemented or become part of the Stop the Bleed campaign? So, yes, just to remind you that you have 3 minutes if you're making a statement.
Yeah, so my name is Wendy. I'm a Culver City resident. I'm also an emergency medicine physician. I actually do tactical medicine and medical support for law enforcement. There's a national or nationwide campaign called Stop the Bleed, where we train officers and citizens what to do if somebody's bleeding next to you. 911 might take a while to, whether it's a minute or 3, we can learn how to stop bleeding in those 3 minutes. So I'm happy to get involved in,
If you
in
can
this
give us
project.
more information, that'd be
Yeah.
great. Thank you. Next question is, have you seen the shelters for the classrooms can we research? And Kathy, if you can come forward to talk about that a little bit more. Kathy Johnson. Just because I'm not quite sure exactly.
Absolutely. Thank you for hosting this, by the way. It's been very great. So there was a lot of Facebook posts that have been going around. I think it was in Ohio, and it was a shelter that can be put, especially in elementary schools, where they can quickly get the children into the shelter in the classroom, and they can't, it's bulletproof. They can't open the door. It's just a very secure place. I know it's kind of a reactive measure, but if there is an active shooter and we can get those kids to safety, I don't know what the cost is, but I just thought someone invented it, and why not take a look at it?
Have any of the police officers, have you heard of that at all?
That's the first I've heard of it.
Yes, that would be great. Thank you. Okay, question. How long will the temporary fencing be in use at Culver City High School? I feel it's quite unsafe. Do we have security there or a camera there? Which temporary fencing?
In front of Robert Frost.
Robert Frost.
The kids are talking about that they feel that that's unsafe,
So I believe the timeline for the removal of the fence is May of this year.
The fence will be removed by mid to the end of summer.
And there's a camera in front of the high school that looks in that direction. It also looks in other directions. But there was cameras in the Frost Auditorium that were removed during the renovation process. So until the process is done, the cameras won't go back up there.
so it's just, that was, I don't know if you're counting that as an access point. When you count 4 to 6 access points to the high school, would that be counted as one?
No.
Okay, because that's.
If they were to get into that fence line, it only leads them into an empty shell of an auditorium and into more fencing. There's no access from within that fence line or the Frost Auditorium into the school. There's fencing surrounding the entire perimeter of it.
Okay, I've heard differently.
We'll double check.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you. So I don't know if this is going to be read out completely, but it says, my son was threatened by a student during class. I contacted my son's counselor and said she would address it. She called me later and said she spoke to my son and the student separately. How do I find out if the parents were contacted about the threat, and how do we follow up as parents? This was early in the year or maybe even late last year. So one of the things I'm going to say to that is, first of all, understand that, if you've contacted the counselor and the counselor said that they've handled it, that's one thing. If you're not comfortable with that answer, then definitely follow up with not just the counselor, but the assistant principal or the principal, depending on the school site. They're not going to be able to talk to you about the particulars of the conversation they had with the student, or if there was any discipline, simply because that's a confidential matter. But I would definitely continue to follow up just to make sure that you feel comfortable with the response. Make sense? Okay, two people who would like to make statements. Sammy Shanman.
Sorry, I'm really short. Okay. So my math teacher recently was very concerned about our classroom. So there's tons of glass walls in that. So he blocked them off, and he spent a portion of the period talking about what would happen if an event were to occur in our class. And he went over what we would do to block each window individually and a whole bunch of different scenarios in our classroom. And I can't speak for anyone else, but for me, that made me feel really safe in that class. And I was wondering if that's something we could do in maybe have a day where each teacher was to take 10 or 15 minutes from that class and go over procedures for their class and make the students feel like if something were to happen, they would have a plan of action. So, yeah.
Thank you. So I also wanted to say, I know that Dr. Cooper, they're going to be working with their staff tomorrow at the high school and going over emergency procedures, and I'm sure that they'll incorporate that as well.
Dr. Cooper. I'm the principal at the high school. So I actually wanted to say that today's second period, we gave our announcement time to our teachers to go through the emergency plan, as we do have a lockdown drill planned for this week. So they did go through the plan. They went through the procedures of what the students should be doing. So they did get about 5 minutes today to go through the plan and answer questions. And a lot of them went past that 5 minutes because students did have questions to ask and answer. And I heard a lot of positive feedback from staff today that they were fortunate to have that opportunity, and students were fortunate to have that opportunity as well. And our staff is going through a safety training tomorrow with our Director of Security, Mr. Ronchetti.
I just wanted to, is this on? I just wanted to follow up on that a minute, because Sammy raised a really important point that I at least hadn't thought about until she said it. And it sounds like the process doesn't really take into account either. It's a little bit different in each classroom. And so if you did it second period, everybody saw what to do in their second period class, but their fifth period class might be different. It might be worthwhile, even though it's a lot of time, to do it in every single period.
Absolutely, and it was a start for us today. So it was really important to make sure that students knew the procedures of the drill in preparation for the drill. But I did hear what Sammy said, and I thought that was a great idea, so we will look into it. But definitely today was a start for the teachers to get comfortable in having that conversations with students and providing that time for students to ask questions as well.
Thank you. Darlene Conte? Like to make a statement?
Hi, school board. Thank you very much for having this. Thank you to the police department. Just it's multifaceted, so I'll try to get through everything very, very quickly. First question is for the police. Can we have a police presence at the middle school and the high school, at least in the mornings, so that when the kids roll up, there is somebody there that they can see? I think just having a visible presence of even one patrol car would really make a difference, just in the feeling that the kids are having. My son is in second grade. He goes to this fine school in Howe, but we have neighbors and friends that have children that go to the middle and the high school, and the nerves are shredded. Unfortunately, we're all here because at least I feel horror at the recent events as well as helpless, and I'm trying to get armed as much as possible with as much information that I can share with my son on what to do. So with regards to that, as far as boosting security, is there any way we can get everybody to buzz in school? Because I know that I can walk into this front office here without being buzzed in. I know we spent a lot of money last year on upgrading our air conditioning. Maybe we can designate some funds to get some good security in here, whether it's cameras or bulletproof glass, at least on the most vulnerable areas of the school that are right near the front door or near any of the exits. We could look into that, and I'm sure that if it came down to being a financial issue, that just put the word out and we would fundraise. We would get the money for you to get all of that security. It will be done. It will happen immediately. So please, let's not make it about money. We'll make the money happen if we can get that those very preliminary precautions put in place. Can we get the teachers all trained in how to do drills? Every single teacher should know what to do, not just the students with drills, but the teachers. Can we have outreach for kids at risk? And not just kids at risk, but their parents. Because a lot of these parents don't know what to do. They're trying. They don't have the tools. So how do we get these families? I don't believe monsters are created overnight. I think this is a long line of alienation that happens to these kids. Next is a legal issue. Can we require parents who own guns to register with the school that they have a gun in their home? And can we ask, again, it's a legal issue for our city council, can we ask that those parents be required to carry a lockbox? Most kids aren't walking into a gun store to buy their firearms. They're getting them from their parents. And then finally, if a child is found to be a credible threat, what legal issue does the school board have to protect the students that are at school from that child, and how do we begin to outreach and have that child reincorporated in, if that's even a possibility? Thank you very much.
Thank you.
I've got questions, but I want to wait till all the people.
Also, another question, does the district, the school administrators and teachers feel that they have enough support from CCPD to feel protected or prepared of gun violence incidences occur? I'm going to speak for us up here, and then the other administrators can speak as well. Last week was amazing for me, just to see our police officers, to see them at our school sites, to see how they've responded, to see how they've supported us, and just the fact, I think that we're lucky in that. I think that we're lucky that we have such a close relationship with our police department. So I personally, as a superintendent, but as a parent of children in the district, I feel very supported by Culver City Police Department. Dr. Cooper? Everyone else, just so that you know, you probably don't see, but all the principals in the back are going like this.
In the back.
They're saying yes too.
Absolutely. For me, I'm also a parent. I have a junior at the high school. So in the midst of protecting the 2,200 other children, I have my own there. And so I am looking out like every child there is mine as well. So CCPD has been wonderful. I think I have them all on speed dial. They all have me on speed dial. I text them all hours of the night, Lieutenant Dunlap. And they respond quickly, and they've been on our campus all last week. And then I called Monday, and he was like, yep, they're on their way. And they've been there all week. And it was actually things we were doing before the incident even happened. You guys saw the video of the CCPD dancing with our students at lunch at our pep rally. And we want that to be a part of our culture, where they're not just there because something happened, but they're there because they're welcome, embraced into our community, and care about our kids. So that is definitely something we've been talking with them. And like I said, I tell my students and staff, what other school district can you go to and you know your police chief, you know the officers, you know them by first name, last name, you know their kids, you have their numbers on speed dial, and you recognize them and see them walking up the street and in your community. That doesn't happen everywhere. So we're very, very fortunate, and we're very grateful. They have been extraordinary during this time and have made me feel safe as a parent and as a principal as well.
My experience with CCPD is very similar. I don't have, sorry, yes, my name is Elsa Villafranca. I'm principal at the middle school. It's been very similar. No call is insignificant. No call or concern is too small. I'll call with questions. I'll say this happened. They respond within minutes. And it doesn't matter what time of day or what the incident is or what the nature of the call is. They're incredibly responsive and supportive, and they'll send officers right away. And if we need additional resources, like Dr. Richardson, he'll come over too and help out. And whether it gets handled, in 30 minutes or 3 hours, they're always incredibly responsive. And I have zero complaints. I'm extremely happy as an administrator. I know my assistant principals can say the same thing when they call. They're incredibly responsive and supportive of the schools. They know how to handle it. They know how to talk to the kids and talk to the parents. And our experience at the middle school has been very similar. They're very communicative, and we can count on them for anything.
Thank you. Any of our elementary principals like to speak to that, or are you anything different?
Sites and CCPD, and we feel great, knowing that they are right there, and we are able to access them very quickly and easily. 3 minutes response time. Love that.
Thank you. Okay, next question. My son and daughter say text messages don't always go through. Is this an issue that needs to be addressed?
If it needs to be addressed, we're very close to allowing our students onto our wireless network, especially at the high school and middle school. This is not in response to a text messaging issue, but it would solve the text messaging issue. We've had the same comments from our staff. It's very difficult to text in the brick buildings out there, and once we get them on our wireless network, that solves their problem. So we will be getting our students on the same network probably within the next year or so.
Thank you. How do you raise the topic of safety and gun violence with a 5-year-old?
Anybody have that question? Anybody else? If you don't mind, I think I'd like to help address that situation just with you thinking about your child, whether your child is 5 years old or 15 years old. That conversation will look a little bit different. And there are a number of resources on the internet, if you just Google talking with your child about violence, there are a number of resources up on the internet that can help guide that conversation that you would have. You as the parent are the number one reassuring force for your child. So it's important for you to model the process of dealing with things that might be scary. And how you model it is so important, and it provides your child an outlet for processing that themselves. So I'm going to go through very, very briefly some tips. This comes from the National Association for School Psychologists, and it's basically just a very quick, very brief, because I know that just by brain science and neurologically, you aren't really going to be able to hear much more than 3 things that I'm going to tell you right now. But there are probably about 5 or 7 steps I just want you to know. So that's why I'm telling you, number one, go to Google, right? And then remember this, look up National Association for School Psychologists, talking to your kids about violence, that kind of a thing. This will help you, so you don't have to memorize the things that I'm telling you right now. The number one thing is to provide that environment to allow them to speak to you. And it's not, what I would like to say is that that's not the time when you're sitting across from each other at a desk. You know, that's how we talk to, when we're having conversations, we're going to say, I want to have a conversation with you. So you might be sitting across the table, maybe at the dinner table. And the dinner table is actually a great place to have conversations. I will caution that oftentimes when children are talking about things with which they're unsure about, the direct conversation makes them feel more uncomfortable, and it's hard to process that information. So perhaps another time when you're kind of side by side with them, maybe doing an activity, walking, perhaps you'll see sometimes that they'll be your guide. Maybe you're doing some yard work or you're doing the dishes, and they might just kind of hang out with you a little bit. That's the perfect time. You're busy with your hands, they're busy with their hands, and oftentimes when that serves as a little bit of a distraction, you can start to maybe process a little bit of your feelings, like that was a scary thing that happened last week, or how are you doing at school? Are things starting to settle down a little bit? Little bits of, to provide them with some of those inroads, right? So that might happen with any of your children. But when you're having that conversation, at least in early elementary school, it's very brief and it's very simple, okay? Basically, the reassurance that school and home are safe places and that adults are there to care for them are what we want to have as front and center in that conversation. That we're there, and that when you're doing these practices at school and when we're talking about making sure that we're safe, those are all ways that we make sure that everybody is safe. Kind of giving some simple examples, like we keep our doors locked, that on the playground there might be red vest supervisors or your noon duty supervisors there to keep them safe. And so encouraging them, when you go out on the playground, look for the adult on the playground. Make sure you know where the adult is so that they feel like they're in control a little bit as well of their surroundings. So you kind of give them those kinds of tips. In upper elementary and middle school, they're going to be asking more of those questions, right? And so they might need a little bit of assistance distinguishing between like reality and fantasy. This is the age when they're going to come back and say, well, I'll just karate chop them down, and talk about how they're going to save the world, because the heroes are big. Action heroes are big, upper elementary and sometimes all the way into adulthood, I think. So, it just depends. It depends on where you are. So the whole point about that is just to say, I know we really want to save, we want to make sure that we can be safe, but we really want to think about reality. We're going to make sure that we're safe by running or hiding wherever possible. And then upper middle high school and high school, they're really going to start to voice their opinions and their advocacy. Like, this shouldn't be happening. This is wrong. What is going on? And that's your role as is developing that voice for them, saying, yeah, this doesn't feel right. What are some of the things that we can do, right? But making sure that they understand that that's why we have these safety protocols and these guidelines. That's really engaging them in being in control of their surroundings, and making sure also that something as simple as when they're walking down the street, only keeping one headphone in, because we know we've lost that fight for them to not wear a headphone. So just put one in so that they always can keep, be aware of their surroundings. It's so important that they be able to hear what's going on. So little things like that, I've definitely given you more than 3 tips. So short answer, yes, it's very important to have an age-appropriate conversation. It will not look the same with your 5-year-old, with your 15-year-old. And I'm actually able to talk with anybody afterwards for any other resources out there as well.
I'm going to add to that with Ms. Pamilia. I support everything that she mentioned as well. And again, I want to reiterate that I know the administration and the board have talked as well with making sure that you are having age-appropriate activities and discussions, which is why we had talked a lot about the walkout and why we didn't necessarily want to immediately involve elementary school students for a variety of reasons. But I would also say that like Ms. Pamilia mentioned, the home is definitely, in your guardians, your parents are the first place to have that sort of sense of reassurance that they are safe in the schools. I'm not a pediatrician, but I have a great pediatrician, and I just want to share a couple tips she had given me with my kids, which I thought were wonderful. When my kids turned 7, they're now 10 and 13, she said, it's now time for you not to watch the news in front of your kids. She said, a hurricane, a shooting, a tsunami, across the part of the world is in their minds happening right in their front yard. So maybe I had to stop listening to NPR in front of my children just because it seemed fascinating to me, but it was just too much information for their minds to handle. And then she also started having, I don't know if your pediatricians are doing this, small conversations about gun safety with my children, just in questions like, what do you do if you go to a friend's house and they want to show you a gun? So consider having that conversation as well, because many kids don't know. I would say that we went back the second time, and she asked my son again, and he got it wrong. So you might need to have it more than once. So that's it. Thank you.
Thank you. Final question, will this information be presented to the kids in an age-appropriate way? Absolutely. Absolutely.
Is that okay? Well, you told me it was on, and it wasn't on. Okay. I had 3 different questions of all the thousands of great questions people asked. I had 3 that are left that I don't think anybody asked. And I think these are all for our CCPD and our psychologist, but let me know if somebody else should answer this. Let's do them one at a time. So the first one that's on my mind is the process you talked about when somebody's identified as having made a threat, and maybe it's criminal or maybe it's not or whatever, sounded really good. The fact that you assess and you also bring the psychologist in, and it's not treated just as a criminal matter, it's also treated as a mental health issue. And I wonder if you actually know anything about if there are statistics on how many school shooters, because there's unfortunately been a very large number of them, were seeing a therapist at the time that they were a school shooter. Because my impression is it's practically none of them. Once somebody gets into the system, they may still have lots of problems, but they don't become a school shooter. Do you know if that's true?
question. I don't know the answer to that, but I would kind of imagine not, that they're not in treatment. They don't have a therapist, because somebody in treatment is going to have an outlet for something like that. So yeah, I kind of agree. Those cases we have with school shooters, there's all sorts of factors: isolation, sudden events that can trigger. People don't just snap. That is a common misconception. People don't just snap. It's a culmination. It's a process. There may be a triggering event at the end that will be the catalyst for them to move to action, but it's rare that we have people that snap. It's usually a long process, and there are lots of signs and indicators along the way. And, you know, we're hearing about what happened in Florida, and as the chief said, it's not appropriate to comment on it just yet because we don't know all the facts. But it doesn't happen in a vacuum. There are, if we act as a community, if people look out for each other, people report leakage. I mean, one of the things we didn't mention is leakage. When a young person is thinking about this, it's very difficult for them to keep it to themselves. It usually leaks out in some way, whether that's social media, a friend, a peer, something like that. So, yeah, the original question, mental health services are very important, and I would imagine that many of them have not had therapists, but I'm sure some of them did, but I'd say majority probably not.
Would be what I expect. So, to me, that's a lot about, you know, what the process is, and I really appreciate what it is. Which brings us to the next thing, which I think is probably for our police chief. Are you aware of any additional laws that you wish we had in place that would enable you to do something that you can't do now because it's simply not within your legal power to do it on this issue? Is there something we should be advocating for that you need?
Is there something I think the school board should be advocating for?
In terms of the community in general, in terms of legal authority, is there some, you know, if we only had this law in place, I could do this, or do we have in place what you think you need to be able to respond to things like somebody made a threat?
I think we have in place what we need. It's one of these things where these things, they morph into new laws and new restrictions, just like we can point to several things throughout probably the past 20 years or so, where we're not even used to dealing with some issues, and when they come up, we come up with different laws to try and combat these things. For instance, marijuana being legal now, you told me that 10 years ago, I'd thought you're crazy. So these things change as society needs them to change. But as far as I'm concerned, right now we have in place what we need to be in place. Obviously, the big topic is more gun control issues, and again, California is one of the strictest states. I think it's more than just gun control. I think there's a lot of factors involved here.
All right, and last one, and I know everybody wants to go home, but one other thing that I think is worth bringing out because it touches on this. We've talked a little bit briefly about when there's minors involved, we want to be careful about what we say, what's confidential, and so forth. Can you just say something a little bit about when there's a potential criminal case, how it goes in terms of, you know, what we can and can't tell the community, so people have a sense of what to expect if something's going up and there is a potential criminal case?
Well, there are certain things in place by law, one of them being juveniles' names cannot be released. So when we're talking about a situation like that, it's just not even legal to do it. We can't do it. The school board can't do it. There's privacy issues. It's in the criminal justice system for juveniles, it's all about the welfare of the child, regardless of the crime that was committed. And that's the way it is right now. So those kinds of things are confidential, and we can't release that information. We can tell you the age, the sex. We can tell you the charge that was filed, but we can't get into identifying information like name.
All right, thanks. I don't know if any other board members have comments or questions.
Okay. I do have one question first, and then I wanted to kind of address just a couple things that I think haven't been mentioned thoroughly. So maybe the principals of the middle school or all the principals in the room could speak to, along with Mr. Ronchetti, about if we have something in place that's like a text system with all the adults, because one of the main pieces of advice is to run, which you would do so if you had some idea about where the shooter was, and if the adults we're able to communicate that information to the other adults, then some folks would actually have the information in order to do so. Are we set up to do that? Is that something we can do?
Other than our personal cell phones, I'm not aware of any system.
Well, I guess that's the system I'm talking about. Is it possible to onboard every new teacher with a group text that the entire staff has access to for this case, God forbid?
Yes, and even beyond that, we're working on, there's various apps out there, and we've been looking at several of them for the past several months, trying to figure out the best one. But yes, we don't have anything like that in place, and it's high on our priority list.
Okay, that's great. So I wanted to just address a couple things that I noticed haven't been completely spoken to. So the first has already been mentioned to some degree. This is the very first of a number of conversations we'll be having on this issue, so please know that as much as we regret that this is our reality, and we're taking it very seriously, and it's an ongoing process starting now. And that actually there are school board members who are very aggressively working on this. There's a subcommittee formed, and so there are lots of things that are going to be coming before us as these next months proceed along the lines of what our current school safety situation is. And then all of the other issues that are related to school safety, which leads me to want to talk about the mental health piece a little bit. So, we are talking about immediate upgrades that Mr. Ronchetti spoke to at points of access and secure entryways. And we have already highlighted so many of our excellent measures that are in place, and we're so grateful for having such an incredibly close relationship with our police department, both in proximity and in relationship emotionally and otherwise, and we feel so grateful for that. And then also when we're talking about spending school dollars, I think one really important conversation to have is at this preemptive level, right? Like, how are students getting to the breaking point? How are they getting to that place where they are without hope? And as the physician spoke to, it's not a snap. Right? There's a process. And so we are absolutely thinking about it from that perspective as well. And the superintendent has spoke to the board, and the board is discussing immediate plans about what is our current funding situation for our social emotional supports and where does that need to go, and it needs to go higher. We need to do more there, and we're going to do more there. So we're aggressively thinking about how to support our students in order to preempt any horrifying reality, because really that reality is just a sign of some other very big hole, right? Or a number of very big holes. And so please know that we're having that conversation, and we want to hear from you on that too. So continue to come to us with your thoughts about what social emotional wellness should look like in this district, because that's a huge, huge component.
So I ditto everything Kelly said and the other members. But there's one request that I have for, is it Dr. Dan or Dr. Richardson? Okay, Dr. Dan. Because all of you are here because this is something that you clearly care about. And all of the people who are watching also might have some questions about what you as the parents can do, because we've shared what the school district is doing, PD has shared with what they're doing. And I personally believe parents are the first line of defense, because if there's a situation within our schools and it comes from one of your child's peers, there is a parent in this district who missed the signs. And we don't want it to be any one of us, right? So if I could ask you, you said, there are signs, if you could give us, 3 or 4 things that parents can look for, that we can look for to pay attention to, and what to do in response when we see those things, just to help us all tonight.
Yeah. Okay, I'll keep it brief. Many of the kids, many of the young people, they're going through adolescence. Now, all adults have been through adolescence. I see it as one of the hardest times in life. So much going on, so much change, so much pressure. But in talking about some of the kind of indicators, I just jotted a few down. Bullying's going to be a factor in there as well, whether your child is a victim of bullying. Substance use, that's an issue. Low self-esteem, connected with humiliation and shame. that can lead to depression. We see a lot of our young people, we see them as very angry as well. And when I work with somebody who's very angry, very often I find that the anger is masking a depression, and the anger is actually a depression. And you may see that with a lot of young people. They don't know how to express that depression. It comes out as anger. Isolation, exclusion, withdrawal, withdrawal from peers, withdrawal from family. These are all kind of red flags, indicators that somebody may be going through some difficulty, whether it's an emerging mental health issue or a relationship issue that they're going through at that period of time. So we've got sudden loss. A history of abuse is also a factor. Prior police contact, negative police contact. Poor coping skills and low frustration tolerance. And all these skills, these coping skills, can be improved, as we develop, as we grow up into adults. We learn to tolerate frustration, most of us. And also, if there's a history of violence, I mean, when I think about behavior, the best indicator of future behavior is past behavior. Now, it doesn't mean that somebody is painted for life, that they're going to be like that, but it has to be taken into consideration whether there's been any history of violence. And as our young people go through adolescence, they become very opinionated. They become very active in their causes. And it can also lead them to collect grievances. Now, there's a term, a grievance collector. That's some of our active shooters, not just school shooters, but adults. They've been grievance collectors. You've heard them talk about their manifestos and things like that. And the same with young people. It's relative. What we may see as a small grievance may be absolutely pivotal to them. So we must look at their worldview through their eyes in order to be able to understand it. But you are the experts on your children. You know your children better than anyone else. You know the signs to look out for. You know when there's a change. And I just encourage everybody to talk to your children, to listen to your children. Improve those relationships, because that's where the key is. If your child feels comfortable talking to you, that's a wonderful thing. Okay. Thank you. And I mentioned the school threat assessment response team, and I have some pamphlets that I'm going to leave at the front. I talked to all the school administrators, the principals, and we're already using these resources with our students. But if anybody's interested, I'll leave some pamphlets by the door too. Thanks.
My name is Melissa, and I have a student in CCUSD at Farragut. He's a young student. He's only in first grade. And something my husband and I have talked about even well before the incident in Florida was, when I was in high school, Columbine happened. Shortly after my son was born, a few years, Sandy Hook happened. And I thought, I want my son in Culver City. There's reasons I want him here. But one of the things we think about is our students are so prepared for fire drills. They are so prepared for earthquake drills because, God forbid, we never want these to happen, and we know maybe one day they might. Why is it that Culver City, or any school district for that matter, not have, and again, an age-appropriate drill, and I appreciate that in all levels, but why do we not do an active drill for an intruder? It doesn't necessarily have to be a shooter. But it was over the 100th day of school this year that our elementary school had a drill, and it was after the incident in Florida. Why are we not rolling this out at the beginning of each school year when we're showing, especially the small children, how to do a fire drill and how to do an earthquake drill? These are the times we live in, unfortunately, and this is something I think the school board needs to address for future, and not future 5-6 years from now. Unfortunately, it needs to happen, I think, next school year, that this has to be something in the forefront of your mind, that we add it to our safety precautions and our emergency plans for our children. Thank you.
Can I speak on? I'm Kim Delicato. I'm principal at Lynn Howe, and just to piggyback and kind of address that on behalf of the elementary principals, we do have the lockdown drills, and we actually have been having conversations about the frequency. So I think at the elementary level, you're going to see an increase in the frequency of those, which will also change the pattern of time of year.
Do we have one more? Yes.
Hi, I'm Tracy McClellan. I'm the interim director at the Office of Child Development, and we have the preschoolers. So just to let you know, too, to answer that question with you, we do have lockdown drills with our preschoolers. We do have a system that teachers are all aware of, and we do practice along with the fire drills and along with the earthquake drills. We do not let them know it's an active shooter drill. It's more of a hide and seek type of game. We do not want to scare the children. We let them know that, oh, it's an emergency, same as a fire drill, same as an earthquake drill, and we do bunker down, lock the doors. We get them into safe positions. We're away from windows. Our windows are covered, and we treat it as if, shh, let's see if we can be quiet, see if anyone can find us. And it's more of a game in that way. They get stickers, we say great job, and we do practice those drills. So the preschoolers are aware. We look at it as an emergency drill. There's a specific code that they hear over the speaker and that they know, and we're practicing them and doing them more often than not. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Tracy. So I think with that, it's 8:30. Oh, do you want a final statement?
I'm
Chief
sorry,
Bixby?
I just wanted, I was just reminded by our council member, we do have at the police department locks for guns. For anybody who wants one, they're free of charge, and we do have them. The person to contact would be Lieutenant Troy Dunlap, so if anybody's interested, we do have those available.
Okay, thank you. All right. Do you have a question? Okay, quickly, yes.
Do you have a list of registered gun owners in Culver City, and do you conduct random checks on the guns and the actual gun owners themselves? And also, the loophole of if you go to purchase a gun and then you have to be checked for the database and you're told about it takes 3 days to clear, but if you don't get that clearance or they don't come back with the answer straight away, that the person can get approved automatically for the gun? Is that the case here?
Yeah, that's definitely not, we don't get school board and district, but we'll let Chief Bixby.
I'm looking at you, but I should be looking.
Yeah.
So I'm going to have the captain handle that because her back was turned to me and I don't hear very well at all, so I didn't catch any of that.
So we have a database that we're able to access to look up, if you will, any gun owner in the United States. We do that on an incident-specific basis. So to answer your random search question, no, we don't do that.
Thank you. I want to thank all of you again for being here, and I really want to give a round of applause to Chief Bixby and all our PD and Dr. Dan, Mr. Ronchetti, thank you, all our administration. And again, we'll continue to have these conversations, so keep having them with your kids. Thanks.